Hello and welcome. Tonight, it may take longer than expected for train services to resume in Abuja-Kaduna route as families of kidnapped victims warn Nigeria Railway Corporation against resuming operations unless their loved ones are free from captivity. Vice President Professor Yemi Ogunbiyi and other prominent Nigerians gather in Lagos to celebrate veteran journalist Professor Yemi Ogunbiyi. Speakers agree it's time for national restoration. Day of tribute for human rights activist Yinka Odumakin as renowned lawyer Femi Falana takes a swipe at the National Council of State over release of convicted high-profile politicians. And more controversy as a badly damaged Russian warship Moskva sinks in the Black Sea. Ukrainian authorities claim its missiles hit the warship. On business news tonight, Nigeria's headline inflation rises to 15.92% in March on increase in food commodity prices and higher energy costs, the latest report from the National Bureau of Statistics.
On sports news tonight, Nigeria's Super Eagles to face Ecuador in an international friendly on June the 2nd.
It's Good Friday, and prominent clerics are asking Nigerians to remain steadfast and optimistic despite the state of the nation. And they also prayed for the release of kidnapped victims of the Kaduna train attack.
And just like Terry said, it is indeed Good Friday, and on the Christian calendar, it's the commemoration of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, a prelude to Easter, and here's wishing all a happy celebration. Now, some families who may not be in the mood for Easter are families of victims of the Abuja-Kaduna train kidnap. After their meeting today in Kaduna, they appealed to the federal government to step up the search for their loved ones who are still in captivity. They're also asking the Nigeria Railway Corporation not to resume services along the Kaduna-Abuja axis unless their loved ones are released.
These are the aggrieved relatives of the kidnapped victims of the March 28th Kaduna train attack. Since the incident occurred, they've been meeting regularly to discuss as a group and also get updates on the way forward for the release of their loved ones. The looks on their faces clearly defines the pain and trauma they are passing through. The group had earlier given the federal government a 72-hour ultimatum to rescue the victims. The ultimatum has now expired, and now they have a message for the government.
We are grateful to God that before the expiration of the 72 hours, we heard from the federal government after the Federal Executive Council meeting on Wednesday through the Minister of Information that the government is already in dialogue. They are already on top of the situation with what has happened, that the government is already discussing with the abductors of our relatives. So we are happy about that. We have noted it, we acknowledge it, and we appreciate their effort in this regard. What we want to add is that the government should speed up this process of discussion with them so that they can come out, released very soon. This is our appeal now.
The bandits have spoken with some relatives of the abductees, but without making any specific demand, an indication that perhaps the bandits have a score to settle with the government rather than the victims. This is a source of concern for their families.
I've spoken to the bandits. I was one of the first guys that spoke with them. I've spoken with them 11 times. And aside me, I don't think any other person has done that. 11 times. And what did they say? The first instance, they said they had their targets on that train. That it weren't our parents and sisters or brother that they aimed at. But these were just, in quote, necessary evil they had to do with them. And what did they tell me? That the governor has been running his mouth. And that's why they came to his doorstep. And this is just the beginning.
We're begging the government to think about it. We have lives over there in the bush. We don't know how they're living. We don't know what they eat. This is a rainy season. At least let's think about this thing. Let's be conscious, at least for once.
NRC should not be talking about reopening their services now when our people are still in captivity. Because what is the assurance that if they start services now, that people that will board the trains are safe? What measures have they put in place to guarantee the security of people that will patronize their services. So it is not, and we don't want a reoccurrence. If they do, we are not going to take it lightly with them.
It's been 18 days of nightmare for these people whose relatives are still with their abductors. As it stands, all they can do now is pray, hope, and urge the government to facilitate the rescue of their loved ones.
Meanwhile, the war against terror is receiving a boost with the approval of the United States government to sell military equipment to Nigeria worth $997 million. This is coming after the U.S. government lifted existing objections following human rights concerns. The Defense Secretary Corporation Agency, which announced the sale of the helicopters and related defense systems to the Nigerian military, says the weapons include 12 attack helicopters, 2,000 advanced precision kill weapon system guidance sections, and a night vision imaging system. Reports had it that the U.S. denied Nigeria's earlier request over human rights concerns by the military, a claim the federal government refuted. But the United States said the sale of the weapons is part of efforts to boost security for Nigeria. The proposed sale will also require multiple trips by the U.S. government and contract representatives to participate in the program and technical reviews, plus training and maintenance support in the country on a temporary basis for a period of 5 years. It will also require approximately 3 contractor support representatives to reside in the country for a period of 2 years to support the program. And forging greater national unity, holding more dialogue and renewing hope in Nigeria are some of the key issues played up by prominent Nigerians who gathered in Lagos for the presentation of the memoirs written by Professor Yemi Ogunbiyi to commemorate his 75th birthday. The Vice President, Professor Yemi Ogunbiyi, who was the special guest of honor, asks Nigerians to engage more with one another and adopt a new thinking that will lead to the country's restoration.
The Road Never Forgets, memoirs by Dr. Yemi Ogunbiyi, chairman of Tanis Communications and former managing director of Daily Times. A 500-page book the author presents at this ceremony as part of his 75th birthday celebration. The work tells compelling stories of his childhood, career, and the many successes he recorded during his professional career. It also tells us about his community engagements in Ogun State. Some of the dignitaries who graced the event include former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Chief Emeka Anyukwu, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Major General Ike Nwachukwu, Minister of Interior, Rauf Aregbesola, Governor of Ekiti State, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, Governor of Ogun State, Dapo Abiodun, Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka, and former Governor of Cross River State, Donald Duke. A former Governor of Ogun State, Olusegun Oshoba, who is the chairman of the ceremony, describes the book as one of intellect.
The book is factual, intellectual, educative, and thank God is something of history. I can assure you that those of us who want to be educated about the development in Nigeria will find the book very interesting.
Chief Emeka Anyukwu says the book is not only the story of Dr. Ogunbiyi's life, but also an admirable sketch of Nigeria's transformative conditions.
I believe that the picture that emerges from the book is that Nigeria has largely been on the decline during the period in question, and that in Yemi's words, Nigeria needs a fresh start, new thinking, and a new beginning.
Meanwhile, Vice President Professor Yemi Ogunbiyi, in his address, says the country needs frank discussions like this to further unify the country.
As for anyone who has read this book or who will, you will notice that somehow it almost seems that by his open, vulnerable style, he disarms and commands empathy and admiration. And perhaps there is counsel there for us as a nation. Perhaps we need to talk more to ourselves and not at ourselves. We need frank discussions on the issues that divide us. And we need openness about our fears and prejudices. Perhaps that way we may gain each other's confidence.
Dr. Ogunbiyi, in his remarks, states that he wrote his memoir to inspire the next generation.
Our country needs a fresh start, new thinking, a new beginning. So in telling my unique story, I do so in the hope that it could engender a sense of regeneration for a national restoration to a past that I was familiar with as a child, and a future country that's more humane, better structured, one that guarantees a place for my children.
The ceremony also served as a fundraising for the Yemi Ogunbiyi Anglican Schools, Shagamu in Ogun State, and the entire proceeds from the public presentation will go to fund the expansion of the learning institution.
It's been 1 year since the passing of human rights activist and politician Yinka Odumakin, and to preserve his memory, friends and political associates gathered in Lagos for the launch of a book and the establishment of the Yinka Odumakin Foundation in honor of a comrade whom many describe as a foremost advocate for restructuring. His associates used the opportunity to zero in on governance, speaking holes on the decision of the National Council of States to grant pardon to some convicted former governors. Our correspondent Bukola Samuel Wemimo reports.
To immortalize.
It was a hall packed full with friends and political associates of the late human rights activist Yinka Odumakin, an atmosphere reminiscent of one where the late activist would have been found in his lifetime speaking truth to power. And in the last 1 year, widow of the late activist has found time not just to mourn, but also to document her husband's lifetime of struggle for a better Nigeria. Her reflections have culminated in today's launch of the book titled Comrade and the Yinka Odumakin Foundation, OOF. Chairman of the occasion, Pa Ayo Adebanjo, sets the tone for the event by reiterating his call for constitutional amendment.
You have to continue the fight. Where Odumakin left it. As for me, I'm gone. What am I waiting for? It's on you. The country leads on. And don't let anybody deceive you. Until you refer this country to a federal system, where everybody is happy under this constitution, you will never get peace.
Goodwill messages flowed freely from dignitaries, including Yinka Odumakin's political associate of many years, Pastor Tunde Bakari.
I will call Yinka at 2 a.m. and say, Yinka, there's a challenge. So I'll see you in 30 minutes. He had no personal security. He would drive himself. He was fearless. And he had done his bit. It's not how long, it's how well.
He had an incredible energy that was as prodigious as his network of friends. He was everywhere at every time, brimming with ideas on how to make Nigeria better.
Now, so tireless was Yinka, even on the day he passed away. In the ambulance on the way to the hospital, with his life dangling on the line, he asked for his computer. He still had an article he had to get off to the press.
The afternoon of tribute to Odumakin climaxed when the guest lecturer, Mr. Femi Falano, poked the current administration with contradictions between its promises on restructuring in 2014 and what it has delivered.
Of course, you are aware of the VAT over VAT, the case that Rivers State won. The federal government went to appeal to the Court of Appeal and now in the Supreme Court. The federal government discovered it was not going to win the case. So they quickly rushed to the National Assembly. Please, can you put VAT? Can you take it to the exclusive legislative list? Of course, the federal government lost. So your oppressors are benefiting from lack of restructuring. We never say, please, come and take those powers in Abuja. So what we therefore do? Political and legal. Legal, I think we have reached a dead end. Political now. I'm suggesting to state government, please, state control of your affairs and let the federal government go to court.
In her remarks, the widow, Jo Odumakin, promised to carry on with her late husband's ideals.
His legacies, I will keep it. I will continue by the grace of God to remain strong, and I promise that I will never let you down.
Even in his last days, the late activist Yinka Odumakin was said to be sending articles for publishing and holding virtual meetings from his sick bed. A profound lesson to all that the life of a man is measured not in duration, but in impact on society. Bukola Samuel Wemimo for Channels Television News.
In part two, after the break, kinsman of Vice President Professor Yemi Ogunbiyi drums support for his presidential ambition in Ikenne, Ogun State. Plus, political allies of the governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, submits presidential nomination form at the PDP secretariat in Abuja. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Families of kidnapped victims warn Nigeria Railway Corporation against resuming operations unless their loved ones are released. U.S. government approves almost $1 billion equipment to fight terror in Nigeria. Vice President Professor Yemi Ogunbiyi and other prominent Nigerians gather in Lagos to celebrate veteran journalist Professor Yemi Ogunbiyi. Speakers agree it's time for national restoration in Nigeria. Day of tribute for human rights activist Yinka Odumakin as renowned lawyer Femi Falana takes a swipe at the National Council of State over release of convicted high-profile politicians. And more controversy as a badly damaged Russian warship Moskva sinks in Black Sea. Ukrainian authorities claim its missiles hit the warship. Now let's go a little back to one more thing. The senior advocate of Nigeria and human rights lawyer, Mr. Femi Falana, said at the book launch and also the establishment of the Yinka Odumakin Foundation was that he criticized the National Council of State's decision to grant pardon to some convicted former governors.
The only two governors that have been jailed, you now say you want to pay after stealing billions of naira. And somebody asked me this morning, Mr. Falana, what is your reaction? I have no reaction. So what do you mean? My reaction is that all criminals, all thieves, all petty thieves in our prisons should be released. All. You know why? You know why? Because under Section 17 of their Constitution, there shall be equality, equal rights for all citizens. And Section 42 of their Constitution says there shall be no discrimination on the basis of class, gender, whatever. So you can't take out two people on the basis of the fact that they belong to the ruling party. It's illegal. It is not an easy battle to win your freedom. The struggle for restructuring is a struggle for freedom.
To other stories now. At the National Assembly level, the Constitution amendment process may have been settled, but some Nigerians are unsatisfied with some of the amendments they believe should have made the cut. In this special report, our National Assembly correspondent Terry Kumi takes a look at some of the items not captured in the Constitution review process and its implication to national development.
The fifth attempt at amending the 1999 Constitution is ongoing. The 44 Constitution review bills have been transmitted to the State Houses of Assembly for consideration and passage by at least two-thirds of them as required by the Constitution before they can be transmitted to the President for assent. While some say the Constitution does not need amending, that instead a new one should be drafted to capture the country's realities. Questions continue to be asked of the National Assembly regarding why certain amendments were not included. One of them is the creation of state police, considering the rising insecurity across the country.
The Constitution forbids anybody from making laws that pertain to security, or having bodies that discharge any responsibility pertaining to security. How does that work? Having one federal police, one police force, which you call it a force, with the colonial mentality of using it to suppress people and keeping a regime in power, we really need to have changed that. And there's lots of things on the exclusive list that ought not to be there.
The issue of restructuring, which in recent times has been advocated for by Nigerians, was also not captured. This is a concern for some as well.
We need both fiscal and physical restructuring. Fiscal restructuring in terms of monies, revenue sharing formula, but more importantly is the restructuring of the political structure of Nigeria. I believe that the size of government is too big. We need to reduce the National Assembly, for instance, 469 members. Doing what? We could reduce the Senate by 1/3. We could reduce the House of Reps by 1/3. We could also reduce the number of members of state houses of assembly.
Also considering court processes involving defections of governors and lawmakers, Mr. Ojo believes the National Assembly missed a chance to address the matter constitutionally once and for all.
The defection of governors, as immoral as it is, we are told that there is no constitutional provision that says that if a governor defects from party that brought him to power or brought her to power, he has to lose his seat. So I feel that that's another lacuna that should have been taken care of by the Constitution.
The issue of state creation, which was also not captured, despite agitations by various groups, is a concern for many. Regardless, some Nigerians believe that a successful attempt this time to amend the Constitution, especially on some critical provisions which were rejected by the state assemblies, as well as those not assented to by the President, would address some major national concerns. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Well, joining me now on the news at 10 to take a deeper look at this exclusion from the Constitution amendments is the Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Dr. Ehioge West Idahosa. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
There's been a long talk about the need for amending Nigeria's constitution. This has spanned through 3 presidents, from Obasanjo to Yar'Adua to Jonathan, and now this present administration. Why do you think we've had this difficulty in getting, amending a constitution, one that is acceptable to all Nigerians?
Well, as you know, the Constitution is a living document. It's the foundation of our nation state. So it changes from time to time, sequel to the needs of the people arising from interest aggregation and interest articulation. So you're not likely to have a fledgling democracy like ours have in one fell swoop a complete amendment of the Nigerian Constitution. So far, we are dealing now with the 5th alteration bills. So it will mean that we have had 4 successful amendments to the Constitution. But what is not satisfactory is that the fundamental areas that people really agitate about have not been tampered with. And I'm hoping that sooner or later we will get to those issues.
And would you call those areas, state creation, state police, or even restructuring?
Yes, you cannot run away from state police. Ultimately, it's going to be the solution to improve security in our national life. You don't expect a police officer from my village in Edo State to be successful in running a divisional office in Kebbi or Sokoto, for example. We know the constraints. To that extent, I think state police is an idea whose time has come, but we are living in denial. But I'm believing that sustained pressure on this will get the National Assembly to do the right thing.
some have said perhaps state governments take control of their affairs and let the federal government go to court. What do you think? The future of this constitution, or do you see us continuing with alterations year in, year out, administration in, administration out?
Well, we are a federating unit, and by our constitution, we are one indivisible unit. And we have the obligation to protect our constitution and defend it. So in this democracy, we must respect the rule of law. Even if the states are not faring well in certain areas, they cannot resort to self-help. The best they can do is to put the appropriate pressure on the National Assembly to get the business of amending the Constitution to deal with the structural defects of the document itself. You will have to be talking about rescheduling the method of derivation of revenue. You will have to deal with state police. You will have to deal with giving administrative venom to local government system of government in the Constitution so that they don't become the object of state suppression or oppression, and so on and so forth. I think this must be brought to the table so the civil societies and the public will have to do a lot in this direction.
We'd like to appreciate your time on the news at 10. Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Dr. Ehioge West Idahosa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Still ahead on the news at 10. Nigeria's headline inflation rises to 15.92% in March on increase in food commodity prices and higher energy costs. That's all business news. Do join us again. Kenneth, the hometown of Vice President Professor Yemi Ogunbiyi came alive today as Kingsmen thronged the streets drumming support for his presidential ambition. The major street in the ancient town of Ogun State had traders, youth leaders, other supporters calling on the leadership of the APC to shun money bags and consider the best candidate as the flag bearer for the 2023 election. And ahead of next month's People's Democratic Party presidential primary election, political allies of River State Governor Nyesom Wike have submitted his presidential nomination form at the PDP Secretariat in the nation's capital. The form was presented to the National Organizing Secretary of the PDP, Umar Bature, by Senator Sulaiman Nazif from Bauchi State. And the Independent National Electoral Commission today suspended indefinitely the ongoing continuous voter registration exercise in Osun, Jaba and Ihite-Uboma local government areas in Imo State. This followed the killing of a staff of the commission by gunmen at Ihite-Uboma. The commission says the exercise will now be confined to its state and local government area offices, except the 3 local governments where it was suspended. Let's head to Abuja now, where our correspondent, Terry Kumi, brings us more stories. Hi, Terry.
Hello, Millicent. Thank God it's Good Friday.
Indeed.
And across the country today, Christians trooped to worship centers in commemoration of the day. In this next report, we bring you today's activities in Lagos, Abuja, and other parts of the country.
A passion play by the Pro-Cathedral Catholic Church on the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Afterwards, they proceed for the Station of the Cross.
Have mercy on us, O Lord.
At the Cathedral Church of Advent Anglican Communion, it was a solemn atmosphere as they sing hymns based on Jesus' love for mankind. Taking his Bible verse from John 3, verse 14 to 17, the primate of the Anglican Communion in Nigeria speaks on the essence of love for one another as exemplified by Christ on the cross. He encourages Nigerians to remain steadfast and optimistic despite the state of the nation.
Today, Jesus is lifted like the bronze serpent. You don't need to know or see where he was crucified. What you need is the faith to accept the perfect work of salvation he has done for us.
At the core ministries, prayers are offered to God on behalf of the nation.
Every law of every voice in this nation shouting for vengeance. We are going to deal with that first and silence it.
The senior pastor wants political leaders to see the day as a time of sober reflection and turn to God for answers.
Let this season we celebrate the precious blood of Jesus. Let our voice be amplified over our nation and over our economy so that this nation is healed.
In Lagos, the celebration was a bit more heartfelt with the Stations of the Cross.
What I would say to all Nigerians is to emulate Jesus Christ, who gave himself, gave his life for others. He was innocent, he was the Son of God. He didn't have to die, but he chose voluntarily to die because his Father willed it.
For most Christians, it's not a time to be gaily dressed, but a time of sober reflection of God's demonstration of his love for mankind by sending his Son, Jesus, to die for all.
Still on the Easter celebration, commuters traveling for the celebration across the country have been expressing concern over the heightened security challenges resulting to low turnout of passengers at the motor parks. This is even as train services on the Abuja-Kaduna rail remain suspended and flight activities at the Kaduna airport still on hold. Our correspondent Emperor Simon reports.
The Abuja-Kaduna train services are yet to resume after a recent attack by gunmen on a Kaduna-bound train. Also, 3 weeks after an attempted attack by bandits that left one person killed at the Kaduna International Airport, commercial airlines are yet to resume operations at the facility, and it's a source of concern for management of the airport.
The airlines should start thinking of how, to come back and explore Kaduna, Abuja.
The only option left for persons intended to travel to Kaduna State are buses and smaller vehicles, as commuters turn their attention to motor parks, including the Jabi Motor Park in the Utako area of the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Easter celebration is a time when many people will want to travel to share the moment with their loved ones. Here at this park, the concern is the fact that security challenges still remain a big issue.
Before now, I never travel with on road. I follow the train, and because there's this issue now, and I have a pressing need, I have to go to Kaduna to address, I had to travel.
I just hope the government, they see this as a wake-up call to improving the security situation of the country.
Their concerns are also shared by passengers traveling to other northern parts of the country.
This period normally is a period of excitement, a period where people have sober reflection, where people are happy because of the seasons as Christians. But you can see everywhere is clumsy. People are even scared to travel.
Insecurity is on the rise. In fact, we have to always pray that God should protect us.
In the south, citizens are also traveling to mark the Easter celebration with loved ones, but the turnout of passengers is unusually low.
There's no turnout. People don't travel because, one, insecurity.
Although there is a hike in the price of transportation, some passengers say it is understandable.
I must confess to you, the prices have not really changed. They just added little thing to it, which I think is still okay.
As Christians in Nigeria mark the Easter celebration, citizens can only hope for improved security and a day when they can travel to any part of the country without the fear of any threat. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
That's all from the nation's capital, and Waodo is next with business news.
Thanks
Thanks a lot, Terry. Hello and welcome to Business News. Let's begin with Nigeria's headline inflation rate, which has risen to 15.92% last month, and that's its highest level since October last year. This is due to increase in the price of food, gas, and petrol products. A breakdown of the inflation data released today by the National Bureau of Statistics shows the figure is 0.22% higher than the 15.70% inflation rate recorded in the month of February. At the same time, that report shows that food inflation rose to 17.2% last month, coming from 17.11% in February. Urban inflation climbed to 16.44%. Rural inflation jumped to 15.42%, while core inflation dropped from 14.01 to 13.91% last month. Meanwhile, Cross River State recorded the rate in core inflation at 18.42%. Kwara was slowest at 14.03%. Kogi tops the states with the highest rate of food inflation at 22.21%, while Sokoto State saw the slowest rate at 14.04%. Meanwhile, the World Bank has projected that Nigeria and other sub-Saharan African countries will experience higher level of inflation. This is due to the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which has now triggered supply disruptions. A statement from the International Financial Institution warns that supply of food staples, as well as fertilizers from both countries, which are major global exporters of the commodity, could be halted if the conflict continues. However, the World Bank recommend that policymakers within SSA to adopt innovative solutions like reducing or waiving import duties on staple food temporarily. This is to help provide relief to their citizens who are still struggling to recover from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Nigeria is among countries to benefit from a $45 billion trust fund approved by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which will come into effect on May the 1st. The fund is part of the IMF's $650 billion special drawing rights, which was issued to vulnerable countries in August last year to boost liquidity through resilience and sustainability trust. A statement from the managing director of the IMF says the trust aims to help vulnerable lower middle-income economies address longer-term structural challenges like climate change and pandemics, which pose macroeconomic risks. She also adds that both three-quarters of IMF's country members will be eligible for RST financing. Twitter says it has adopted a limited duration shareholder rights plan, often called a poison pill. This is coming just one day after billionaire Elon Musk offered to buy the company for $43 billion. The company announced today that its board voted unanimously to adopt the plan, which is set to expire on April the 14th, 2023. However, Twitter's board says that the rights plan will not prevent it from accepting an acquisition offer seen as being in the best interest of the company and its shareholders. And that's Business News for tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawodo. I wish you a wonderful Easter celebration. It's back to you, Millicent.
Thank you, Anne. And President Muhammadu Buhari says he is devastated by the flood disaster in KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa, which claimed about 341 lives. In a statement by his senior special assistant on media and publicity, Mr. Garba Shehu, President Buhari called for collaboration among African leaders in developing common and effective strategies for improving emergency management response system, adding that the disruption of water, electricity supply, as well as the destruction of homes, makes this natural disaster one of the worst in recent memory. And a Russian warship has sunk in the Black Sea. The 510-crew missile cruiser Moskva was a symbol of Moscow's military power, leading its naval assault on Ukraine. Here's Samuel Pusey with more on this and other international news and around the world in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. A Russian warship that was damaged by an explosion on Wednesday has sunk, that's according to Russia's defense ministry. Moskva, the flagship of Russia's Black Sea fleet, was being towed to port when, according to the ministry, stormy seas caused it to sink. Kyiv says its missiles hit the warship. The blaze caused the explosion of the warship's ammunition, Russia says, adding that the entire crew were later evacuated to nearby Russian vessels in the Black Sea. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry said it had struck a military target on the edge of Kyiv overnight and promised more strikes against the Ukrainian capital in response to Ukrainian attacks on Russian targets. The ministry said its forces had also taken full control of a steel plant in the besieged port city of Mariupol, which has been encircled by Russian troops for weeks. Powerful explosions were heard in Kyiv on Friday, which appeared to be among the most significant there since Russian troops pulled back from the area earlier this month in preparation for battles in the south and east of the country. Palestinians have clashed with Israeli riot police inside Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. Eyewitness video showed smoke billowing around the mosque as stun grenades fired by the Israeli police can be heard exploding, while Palestinians inside the mosque appear to launch fireworks in the exchange. At least 152 Palestinians were injured in the clashes, mostly inflicted by rubber bullets, stun grenades and beatings with police batons. Israeli security forces have been on high alert after a series of deadly Arab street attacks throughout the country over the past 2 weeks.
Thanks to your efforts in working with us.
A visiting U.S. congressional delegation has pledged support for Taiwan, with Republican Senator Lindsey Graham saying that to abandon Taiwan would be to abandon democracy and freedom. The group of 6 U.S. lawmakers landed in Taiwan on Thursday in an unannounced visit and met with Taiwan's President, Tsai Ing-wen. Taiwan has been heartened by the continued U.S. support offered by the Biden administration, which has repeatedly talked of its rock-solid commitments to the democratically governed island. The family of an African refugee killed by a Michigan police officer during a traffic stop has demanded that authorities dismiss the officer from the force and file criminal charges against him, a day after a video of the fatal shooting was released.
Do you have a driver's license? Do you speak English?
Patrick Lyoa, a 26-year-old Congolese refugee, was killed in a Grand Rapids neighborhood during a routine traffic stop after he struggled with the officer over a stun gun. The officer has not been publicly identified. North Korea has celebrated the 110th anniversary of the birth of the late founder Kim Il-sung with fireworks and an evening gala in Pyongyang's main square, with thousands of people in colorful traditional dress, dancing and singing. The Day of the Sun is North Korea's biggest annual public holiday. Kim, who died in 1994, founded the regime, now led by his grandson Kim Jong-un. This year's holiday marks 110 years since Kim Il-sung was born, and North Korea typically stages bigger celebrations on every 5th and 10th anniversary. Thousands of Catholic faithful have lined the streets of Seville as one of the city's most iconic Easter processions began without COVID-19 restrictions for the first time in 2 years. Spain's Easter traditional Holy Week processions, which are attended by hundreds of thousands of people, were cancelled in 2020 due to the pandemic and only allowed last year with restrictions. Although Holy Week processions take place throughout the country, Seville's are by far the most famous.
Unidos en legítimo matrimonio. ¿Ya vas a Biblia?
And even in times of war, love can break all boundaries. Here, a Russian man marrying a Ukrainian woman in Tijuana, the largest border city connecting Mexico with California, to seek asylum in the United States. Before the Russian invasion, the couple lived in Ukraine and managed to leave the country to apply for refugee status in the US. The couple needed the Municipal Directorate of Migrant Services in Tijuana for support to get married.
We never thought about us getting married in another country, mostly because we were planning it, and we were planning it in Ukraine. But things happened like they happened. We never expected a war to come. No one expected that.
And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to Channel Studios in Lagos.
Thanks, Simon. And now for some sports news, here's Ayotunde Balogun.
Thank you so much, Millicent. Nigeria Football Federation, the NFF, have confirmed that the Super Eagles will play a friendly match against Ecuador on June the 2nd. The match will be played in New Jersey, United States of America. Both teams will clash at the 25,000 capacity Red Bull Arena in Harrison. The match comes only 5 days after the 3-time African champions, Nigeria, will have squared against the El Tri of Mexico in another international friendly. English Premier League side Burnley FC have sacked their manager Sean Dyche after 10 years with the club. Burnley are currently 18th on the table, 4 points from safety. They have won just one of their last 7 games, losing 2-0 to fellow relegation strugglers Norwich on Sunday. Dyche initially joined the club as part of the backroom staff in September 2012, soon taking over from the departing Eddie Howe. But the 50-year-old led Burnley to 2 promotions from the Championship, the last coming in the 2015-2016 season. Manchester United interim manager Ralf Rangnick understands why the fans are disappointed with the club's form this season, as they protested outside the team's training ground, asking them to keep the protests peaceful. Rangnick, who was appointed interim manager in December until the end of the season, said there were moments this season when the team was able to play at a higher level, but bemoaned the lack of consistency.
We had quite a few games where we really played well, not only with regard to the result, but also the way that they played together, that we played together as a team. But what we couldn't do is do it in a sustainable way and over a longer period of time. And yes, I'm disappointed about that. I would have thought that we would be able to play sustainably on a higher level. And yeah, I'm not happy with that myself, for sure. But this is what we will still try to do for the rest of the season.
I'm Ayotunde Balogun. That Sports News is back to you, Millicent, for the wrap.
Thank you, Ayotunde. And the main news again. Families of kidnapped victims of the Kaduna train attack today warned the Nigeria Railway Corporation against resuming operations unless all their loved ones were released from captivity. The United States government approved almost $1 billion equipment to the Nigerian military to fight terror in Nigeria. Also today, Vice President Professor Yemi Ogunbiyi, other prominent Nigerians converged on Lagos to celebrate veteran journalist Professor Yemi Ogunbiyi. Speakers at the event said it's time for national restoration in the country. And it was a day of tribute for human rights activist Yinka Odumakin, as renowned lawyer Femi Falana took a swipe at the National Council of States over release of convicted high-profile politicians. And more controversy as a badly damaged Russian warship Moskva today sank in the Black Sea. Ukrainian authorities claimed its missiles hit the warship. That's News at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Have a good night and happy Easter.